Hi everybody. David Fogel, CEO of the Symphonina Foundation, back with you for another podcast on this Friday, February 21, and I'm joined today by Grammy winner and Grammy nominee Emilio D. who joins us from Buenos Aires, Argentina today. Emilio, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me. And hello to all the listeners of this lovely podcast.
It's totally my pleasure, and great to finally meet you at one of the post-Grammy events just a couple of weeks ago up in Los Angeles. And again, congratulations on the nomination for Mythologies II in the Classical Compendium area, where I believe you were a producer on the album. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, you have an extremely long, extensive career in music, graduate of Berklee Music School. And as we were just talking before we got started, you started a little bit as a percussionist. So let's talk about how you got started in music in general, and then we can branch out to how you got into producing and other things that you've been working on and what you might be working on for this year.
Absolutely. As many in my generation, I started playing in bands, and as I started high school, originally as a drummer. In fact, I arrived at Berklee still as a drummer with many interests that I was looking to explore and that the college would welcome and offer. And I then branched into Latin percussion. I was already writing some original music and arranging when I got to Berklee. But originally, yes, I was a drummer in bands, largely rock bands, some with other interests. The older we got, the more different styles of music we'd listen to and try to bring into what we did. And initially, I really wanted to, like from the very beginning, I now see, I wanted to get involved with the musical experience from a more encompassing role than just being a player in someone else's songs, but I didn't really know how to approach that. So the thing that came more naturally to me at the time was lyric writing. So I wrote lyrics for a number of the songs in the bands that I was playing in, and then eventually started chipping in with some arranging ideas and later decided to study so I would know more about the different tools that I could put to use to do more for the music.
When you're working in a band and then we go to a full orchestral composition, which is being performed at Abbey Road, if I remember, by Royal Philharmonic, maybe London Phil, I forget which one, but there's a big gap.
That doesn't happen overnight.
No, you go from a garage to playing for your friends to go to a high school band party or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you're doing stuff at Abbey Road, and it's an overnight success, as they say, after however many years. But let's go through that experience for you. What was that path that you took that allowed you to go from helping with producing Grammy-winning orchestral vocal albums?
Well, it wasn't really a plan, and it also didn't just sort of happen. It's been a journey. It's easier to see a direction now after the fact than it was as I was moving from one experience to the next. I now remember that when I was at Berklee, I had my first experiences in a recording studio, also as a drummer and percussionist back then. And I remember that in that context, not only I love the recording process, but I would also pick up different approaches, not only from what people, the engineers and producers, or student engineers and producers were doing with the players, as I was a player then, but also that I would see other options that the people in charge weren't taking, and that sparks curiosity. Would that have worked? And after making very inappropriate suggestions to the people that were supposed to be making decisions, I suppose eventually I found my way to being that person.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I guess everybody who starts making suggestions of something that they're interested in, they can make great ones or not so great ones. But it's always nice to have a fresh look at things too, right? Where you're not constrained by what tradition has brought us over and over and over again. So presumably people would be interested in hearing what your opinion is as you're going along that progression. But as you say, you become one of those people at the end. So I guess I do have
Well,
to ask
the
you,
lesson
yeah, go ahead.
the lesson back then was not just in production or the recording process in general, it was in hierarchies. It's
Ah,
not
okay.
necessarily that my suggestions didn't work. Sometimes they did. It's that it wasn't my place
Got it.
to to sort of direct what was going on. I could eventually be a very helpful collaborator by whispering my suggestions in the ear of the people in charge. It just wasn't my place to say them out loud.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Um, and it's useful, particularly when you're working with a larger team of people, to understand what your role is at any given time and what's expected of you, even if you have a broader tool set that's just not required at that time.
Yeah. I guess, do you find that that hierarchy is still something that should be respected in the modern world, modern day, or do you think that perhaps teams now are a lot more, let's say, horizontal than vertical if we want to put them on an org chart and pretty much everybody can talk to anybody else, or does it just depend on?
I would say because at some point when you want to get things done, somebody needs to decide. And there may be a number of people with very valid suggestions or ideas, and they could all, potentially work, and they could all be legitimately successful. But you got to do one thing. So at some point, I suppose with experience comes the flexibility to either be the person making that decision or yielding to the decision made by somebody else, and understanding that when you're at that point where a decision needs to be made, you shouldn't question the decision that was made. You should do your best to help them be successful with that direction.
Right. Yeah. Swim in the direction the leader's going in, right? Or paddle in that direction, whatever the analogy is, right? Everybody's got
I
to be going in
mean,
the same
I
direction.
suppose one could get to a point where the decisions that are made make you uncomfortable, and then it might be time to step down from a project. I haven't been in that situation
Yeah.
yet,
Right.
but I suppose the practical and non-conflictive approach would be to not be uncomfortable and let people follow their direction and see
Yeah.
where it leads them.
Amelia, there was a thing where I used to fly as a hobby, commercial license, actually, single engine. I did over 500 hours, but there's a saying that you have. It's like if you're in an airplane and you're the pilot, but there's one other pilot with you. When the plane is starting to have trouble, you want to be the pilot with more hours than the other guy or gal, so that they just defer to you so you can make the decisions and you don't have to sit there and watch the other person make the decisions. So
I love
maybe
the
there's an
analogy, and
analogy.
I love the analogy, and I truthfully haven't had any experience that compares to that. It's useful to remember that as committed as we may be to the projects we devote or time and love and efforts to, no lives are at stake.
Exactly.
It
Exactly.
it
That's
it's
right.
it it's not a plane that you need to keep in the air or land safely. I mean, we will sometimes use those analogies as in the sense of arrival when we finish something or move on to the next stage, and that's fine. But it's useful to remember that these things matter to us, and we want them to matter to other people. And even if we succeeded that, no lives are at stake, really.
Right, right. So I guess I should ask you, how did you get selected to be on the original Mythologies team, or how did that evolve? And it's maybe you weren't selected, maybe you're part of the team that had the idea in the first place. I don't know. So how did that originate?
No, it's a fair question. I had produced music, orchestral music, and music with, let's call a classical language or vocabulary, back when I was writing original music for visual media. Film scores and the occasional TV cue. So it's not that the language or the sound was foreign to me, is that the most widely known traditions in recording and production of classical music tend to prioritize what's often referred to as transparency. For the recording to make you feel that you were right there as the performance was taking place. And granted, for some music, that's the only thing that makes sense. You don't need to elaborate on that. If the composer wanted to elaborate on that, they would have written different music, they would have
Right.
orchestrated it differently, and
Yep.
so on.
Yep.
And I would say, as a general rule, if anything one were to do in recording or mixing a piece of music, calls attention to that gesture, to that add-on, to anything that feels like an afterthought, then you're probably doing too much or you're doing it wrong. However, if you manage to become another performer, another interpreter, if you really know and understand the music, if you manage to breathe with it, and find a way from the position of the producer or the mixer. I'm not a mixer, but I will usually sit through mix processes trying to, again, emphasize what's happening with the tools at our disposal. If you manage to do that, to highlight what's important, to make it more intense, to sometimes bring that feeling of being in the room, standing next to the performers or in front of the performers, when the recording for some reason didn't manage to capture that intensity. And that's something that one might encounter with, for instance, orchestras. Standing in the live room when the orchestra is playing is a soul-shattering experience.
Yeah.
It's moving beyond what I can put into words. In comparison, being, sitting at home, listening to the recording of that thing, and I emphasize, of that very thing that you witnessed, can feel that it doesn't measure up. So how do you get it there? That's the kind of commitment that I want to believe we have as producers and engineers, as the people trying to capture these things and helping artists and composers share it with the world. How do we make it as intense? And sometimes transparency isn't the way.
When you're producing something like let's say Mythologies or any other orchestral thing, maybe there's a no fast rule for this, but do you like to be involved earlier in the process or at any time
Yes,
in the process or at the beginning?
uh, without hesitation. As soon as they'll welcome me into the process, because again, I don't want to think of recording and just overall record production as something that tries to capture something and convey it to other people. I want to think of the entire creative process as something organic, in the sense that every move in a step of the process relates to how you're going to every change in orchestration or any compositional change leads to potentially to a different approach in recording and mix. So the soonest I'm aware of that change, sometimes I'm welcome in the conversation about the options for changes, sometimes I'm not, and I'm good either way. Like sometimes I'm welcome as not as a co-creator. I'm very rarely credited as a co-writer, and I don't think I don't think I should be.
Mhm.
But I do think that if I'm going to help shape the way that music is recorded and put out into the world, the sooner I'm welcome into that conversation of what the music is, the more organic the rest of the process will be. And it really doesn't hurt to get to the recording studio knowing the music by heart. And the more time I have to work with, I mean, I can sight read okay. There's people who are far better than me at that, but it's still not the same.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's all great. And Amelia, I appreciate the role of the producer far better in the last 5 years of my life than I did ever before. And and really it can make the difference between, like you said, just having something that is, let's say, good versus something that's completely awesome, or maybe borderline even like really, really good. So I have a tremendous amount of
We
respect
strive
for.
for awesome every time.
We do. Sometimes it's elusive, but we do. Even the garage band, we strive for awesome. What are you working on for 2025 that's going to be awesome?
Well, as mentioned, ideally all of it.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I'm continuing to work with artists I've been working with for a long time. For instance, some people might be familiar with my work with John Fimbry, a Massachusetts-based composer who I've done already 4 albums and various other collaborations with. And in fact, one of his Brazilian jazz albums was nominated for a Grammy in 2020 as Best Latin Jazz Album. Chick Corea took that one, and part of it felt right.
Yeah, okay.
So we're now working on repertoire for another Brazilian jazz album with his compositions and lyrics by various Brazilian artists and lyricists, and another album that will be a follow-up to an album of his called American Nocturnes, a sort of chamber jazz, if you will. It's music written with the jazz language, but orchestrated and performed as chamber music. And we're expanding on that concept, initially done in more of a small ensemble format for more of a chamber orchestra, slightly more numerous, with more of the music arranged and written specifically than it was before. I'm continuing to work with a Syrian American singer called Nano on a few songs. We released one called Oma de Mur last year that was a song of hers written on top of a piece by Eric Satie. So there's a nod to classical music there for sure. And we'll continue to explore that in her upcoming songs. I'm working with a Chinese American artist named Mist, Miist, on a project of hers themed after social issues, trying to draw attention to very social issues. And we're currently working on some songs for that. And I'm also working with a couple of classical pianists on their solo piano projects.
Wonderful.
One of them, Leo Lisan, Philly-based. We did a session with in New York last month, and we plan to continue with that.
Do you get to travel all around then? Must be doing a lot of traveling, actually. You're in Argentina now. You're going to probably be at all these places for different recordings. What's your travel schedule look like?
That's right. I do travel for sessions. I usually handle pre and post production remotely. I have produced some sessions remotely. I can do it. I'm not uncomfortable, but my ability to exercise my skills remotely is limited. You can only read a part of the room through a single camera.
That's true. That's true, and maybe a single microphone sometimes too, right? So, what do you enjoy doing the most, Emilio? What do you have the most fun?
Funny you should ask. I've been thinking about that lately. I think the best answer for that is humans are my favorite puzzles. So I like the parts where I'm working with people the most, be it in pre-production, working directly with a composer and going back and forth on ideas for the music, either it's core compositional aspects or arranging ideas or musical direction so that a number of different compositions sort of take shape into a theme or project that makes sense. But also, and perhaps more so, right there in the studio. I spend a lot of the time in the library, as long as I'm welcome.
Yeah.
um, Very often I'm working with session players. Some of them might know each other from other sessions, but to create that cohesiveness and performance takes some extra TLC, and I'm there for it. I don't sit back in the control room and expect them to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it happens, but I'm
Well,
there to
I
help.
think I think everybody who gets an opportunity to work with you is very fortunate. I remember you sharing some of the things that you had worked on an album this last year with me, and got me to listen intently and actually, look at all the production materials, including like the physical, well, the visual materials as well. And I appreciate like the level of detail that you go into in every thought and everything that I'm listening to there. There's whispering in the background to bring things out. There's like, which color scheme did you pick on that? Like every single little thing. So for all the people who want to
By the
be
way, since you mentioned
musicians,
visuals,
yeah.
I often stay with projects after we wrap up the master, and again, if I'm welcome in that conversation, oversee anything from album art to video. I have acted as producer or co-producer for videos for some of the music I've worked on, because again, the process needs to be organic, integral, and true to the work. And you can't always expect someone as talented and experienced as they may be to work on the visuals for a collection of pieces of tracks as if they know it. They may listen to it a few times. We know it better. So we might as well be there and ensure that what they do is true to that music that we spend so much time and efforts on.
Anybody who gets an opportunity to work with Emilio will have a treat. That's for sure. Emilio, before
Appreciate
we
that.
let you go, I don't know if there's any news to break on this, but there's Mythologies 2. I know we're all hoping for Mythologies 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 for that matter. I don't know if you're involved in anything with it, or if you can even say if you are involved. I have no idea, honestly. I really don't. But if there is anything you could share
I
on
will
that,
say
please
this.
do. Mhm.
I will say this. I'm among the ones hoping for more installments, and essentially from more music from Dan Evles, or charismatic leader and
Yes.
composer
Yes.
for this project, and head producer too. Let that be known. She is the one leading the group of producers involved in and making it work as a team. The core team of Mythologies has been working between the first and second album together for nearly 5 years.
Right.
And what happens when you have a group of people working together on a repertoire for that long is that, much like a tour bus, you either end up hating each other and don't want to see each other's faces for at least a little while, or you become family.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like to me. That group of people has become family. Like most families, we don't see eye to eye on everything all the time, and we're in many ways stronger also because of those differences. So how could you not want to get together with those people and embark on a new journey?
Yeah.
So we're all looking forward to next time. I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
All right. Well, fingers crossed. We don't have to wait too long. I'm hoping it'll be rather sooner than later. Emilio, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm at Emilio D. Miller everywhere. Very easy to find.
And Miller has one L, just for everybody out there who might want to go type it in. So, yeah. Emilio, thanks so much for your time today. We wish you the best, and we'll be staying in touch, of course. And anytime you have any other new classical, symphonic, or anything else you want to let us know about, we'll have you back on again.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your listeners for tuning in. And until next time.